Hey everyone, welcome back to Try Not to Sleep. I'm your host, Ethan Brooks. And as always, we're here with another calm, slightly boring story from history to help you unwind. Tonight, we will be talking about the long-running search for Noah's Ark and the strange tales of giants and possible visitors from other worlds, found in the Book of Enoch. All right, get comfortable, and let's see how far you make it before you fall asleep. Enoch traveled to the place where the Watchers and their children, the giants, lived. He carried a message from God. The Watchers were angels who had come to earth and broken divine laws. They taught humans about agriculture, medicine, and astronomy, but they also corrupted humanity. The Watchers took human wives, and their children became the Nephilim, giants who were violent and cruel. The Nephilim ruled over humans and consumed their flesh. They enslaved people and brought chaos to the world. Human society began to imitate the violence of the Nephilim. The world became filled with bloodshed and corruption. Enoch stood before the Watchers and the giants. He told them their actions had angered God. He warned them to repent or face destruction. Enoch described the coming judgment in detail. He said the Watchers would lose their immortality and be punished. Their children, the giants, would be destroyed in a great flood. The Watchers were afraid. They begged Enoch to intercede for them. They asked him to write a petition to God on their behalf. Enoch agreed and went to a remote place to pray and write. He recorded their request and presented it to God. God refused their petition. God declared that the Watchers would be held responsible for their rebellion. The Nephilim would perish, and the world would be cleansed. Enoch returned with this answer and delivered it to the Watchers. They mourned and realized their fate was sealed. Enoch's warnings were ignored by most. The giants continued their violence. The corruption among humans grew worse. Enoch's message became a final warning before disaster. Soon, the world would face the consequences of the Watchers' actions. This set the stage for the events that followed, including the story of Noah and the flood. After Enoch delivered his warning, life on earth continued as before. The Watchers remained in exile, and the Nephilim giants kept spreading violence. Human society grew more corrupt. People copied the giants' cruelty, and bloodshed became common. Enoch's message did not change their behavior. God observed the growing evil. According to the Book of Enoch and Genesis, God decided to limit the lifespan of humans. The situation did not improve. The Nephilim continued to dominate and destroy. Their actions threatened the survival of humanity. Noah was born during this time. The Book of Enoch describes Noah as unusual from birth. He had bright skin and eyes that seemed to shine. His father, Lamech, was unsure if Noah was his own son. He asked Methuselah, Noah's grandfather, for advice. Methuselah visited Enoch, who confirmed that Noah was Lamech's child. Enoch said Noah was special and chosen for a purpose. Noah grew up surrounded by corruption. He did not follow the ways of the Nephilim or the Watchers. He lived a righteous life. God noticed Noah's behavior and decided to spare him and his family. God told Noah to build an ark. The ark would be large enough to hold his family and pairs of animals. Noah received detailed instructions for its construction. He began building the ark on dry land. People mocked Noah and ignored his warnings of a coming flood. The Watchers and Nephilim did not repent. They continued their violence until the very end. Noah completed the ark as instructed. When the time came, Noah, his family, and the animals entered the ark. The skies darkened, and heavy rain began to fall. The floodwaters rose, covering the land. The world of the Watchers and Nephilim came to an end. Only Noah and those with him in the ark survived. The floodwaters covered the earth for months. Rain fell without pause for 40 days and 40 nights. Water rose above the highest mountains. Every living thing outside the ark perished. The Nephilim and the Watchers' children were wiped out. The Watchers themselves were imprisoned in deep places, according to the Book of Enoch. Their punishment was severe and permanent. Noah, his family, and the animals inside the ark waited. For 150 days, the ark floated on the water. There was no land in sight. Supplies inside the ark were rationed carefully. The ark drifted until the waters began to recede. After 5 months, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, in present-day Turkey. Noah waited before opening the ark. He sent out a raven, and later a dove, to find dry land. The dove returned with an olive leaf. This signaled that the waters were finally retreating. Soon after, Noah, his family, and the animals left the ark. They stepped onto dry ground for the first time since the flood began. Noah built an altar and offered sacrifices in gratitude. The Book of Genesis and the Book of Enoch both describe God's response. God promised never to destroy the earth by flood again. A rainbow appeared as a sign of this covenant. The destruction of the Nephilim and the punishment of the Watchers served as a warning. The flood was seen as the ultimate example of divine wrath. It was meant to cleanse the earth of corruption and violence. Only the righteous survived to begin a new chapter of human history. Stories of a great flood and divine punishment appear in many cultures. The narrative of Noah's Ark became one of the most well-known. Its details were preserved in religious texts and oral traditions across the world. The Watchers arrived on earth before the flood. They were a group of angels sent to observe humanity. According to the Book of Enoch, 200 Watchers descended on Mount Hermon. Their leader was named Semjasa. They were supposed to watch, not interfere, but they broke this rule. The Watchers took human wives. Their unions produced the Nephilim, the giants. The Watchers also began to teach humans skills that were considered forbidden. They introduced people to metalworking, showing them how to make swords, knives, and armor. This knowledge led to the creation of weapons and increased violence among humans. The Watchers taught women the art of cosmetics and jewelry. They showed people how to use plants and roots for medicine and sorcery. They explained the movement of the stars, the phases of the moon, and the secrets of the heavens. Humans learned about astrology and divination from the Watchers. Azazel, one of the Watchers, was blamed for teaching people how to make weapons and ornaments. This was seen as a main cause of increased bloodshed and vanity. Other Watchers taught signs of the clouds, earth, sun, and moon. They revealed secrets about the weather and seasons. These teachings gave humans knowledge that was once reserved for the divine. The spread of forbidden knowledge changed society. People began to use weapons for war. Sorcery and enchantments became common. Vanity and pride increased as people decorated themselves with jewelry and makeup. The Book of Enoch describes this as a turning point. Human behavior grew worse as a result of what the Watchers taught. God saw the corruption spreading on earth. The Watchers' actions were declared a violation of heavenly law. Their knowledge was not meant for humans at that time. Consequences of their teachings led directly to the decision to bring the flood. The punishment of the Watchers and the destruction of the Nephilim followed soon after. Ancient Sumerian texts describe beings called the Anunnaki. These figures are often linked to the Watchers in later traditions. The Anunnaki were said to descend from the heavens and interact with humans. Sumerian records mention that the Anunnaki initiated a hybridization program. They selected human women and took them as partners. This resulted in offspring who were part human and part divine. These hybrid children were known for their unusual size and abilities. The Sumerian accounts parallel the Book of Enoch's story of the Watchers and the Nephilim. Both sources describe the union of heavenly beings with human women. Both speak of giants born from these unions. In the Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki's actions disrupted the natural order. Their offspring became rulers and warriors. They were often described as cruel and powerful. The hybrid giants, or Nephilim, began to dominate human society. They enslaved people and used violence to maintain control. Reports from ancient Mesopotamia tell of these beings demanding tribute and sacrifices from humans. Some texts describe the Nephilim as consuming human flesh. Their reign was marked by fear and oppression. The presence of the Anunnaki and their hybrid children alarmed the gods in Sumerian stories. The disruption they caused led to calls for intervention. In the Book of Enoch, God decides to destroy the Nephilim and punish the Watchers. In Sumerian accounts, the gods also debate how to deal with the chaos created by the hybrids. The hybridization program ended with a catastrophic flood. Both Sumerian and biblical traditions describe a great deluge sent to cleanse the earth. The flood was intended to eliminate the Nephilim and restore balance. Surviving humans, like Noah in the Bible or Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh, were chosen to repopulate the world. The stories of the Anunnaki and the Watchers became closely linked in later interpretation. The birth of the Nephilim began with the arrival of the Watchers. These angels came to earth with the purpose of observing humanity. According to the Book of Enoch, they were led by Semjaza. Instead of remaining passive, the Watchers took human women as wives. This act was forbidden by divine law. Their unions resulted in the Nephilim. These children were described as giants, much larger and stronger than ordinary humans. Ancient texts, such as Genesis 6:4 and the Book of Enoch, state that the Nephilim were present on earth both before and after the flood. The Nephilim quickly became known for their great size, physical power, and intelligence. The Nephilim were not only physically imposing, they also possessed abilities and knowledge inherited from their Watcher fathers. Some accounts suggest they had advanced understanding of warfare, agriculture, and astronomy. The giants used their strength to dominate the human population. They enslaved people, demanded tribute, and used violence to achieve their goals. The Book of Enoch describes the Nephilim as cruel and destructive. They consumed enormous amounts of food and resources. When supplies ran short, they turned to eating animals and eventually humans. This cannibalism is mentioned in several ancient sources. The Nephilim's actions increased suffering and chaos among humans. The presence of the Nephilim alarmed both humans and the divine. Their violence and disregard for life led to widespread fear. Human societies began to imitate their behavior, resulting in more bloodshed and corruption. The Watchers, seeing the destruction caused by their children, became fearful of divine punishment. The situation on Earth deteriorated rapidly. The Nephilim's influence spread across regions mentioned in ancient texts, including Mesopotamia and the Levant. Their existence is referenced in the Sumerian, Hebrew, and other Middle Eastern tradition. The rise of the Nephilim marked a turning point, leading directly to the decision to send the flood. The Nephilim grew in number and strength. They spread across the land, establishing dominance over human settlements. Ancient texts describe them as rulers and warriors. Their physical size and aggression allowed them to take control easily. They built strongholds and demanded obedience from surrounding communities. The giants used their power to enslave humans. People were forced to work for them, build their cities, and provide food. The Nephilim consumed vast amounts of resources. When food became scarce, they turned to violence and raiding. Reports from the Book of Enoch and related sources state that the giants began to eat animals and then humans. Cannibalism and brutality became common. The Nephilim also fought among themselves. Disputes over territory and leadership led to wars between giant clans. These conflicts caused further destruction. Human populations suffered heavy losses. Many villages were destroyed or abandoned. Survivors often fled to remote areas to escape the giants' reach. The Watchers observed the chaos created by their offspring. They realized their actions had brought disaster to the world. The violence of the Nephilim spread fear and despair. Human culture and traditions began to break down. Lawlessness increased, and people imitated the giants' cruel behavior. The Book of Enoch describes how the earth itself suffered. Fields were trampled, forests were cleared, and wildlife was hunted to near extinction. The giants' demands for resources led to environmental devastation. The land could no longer support both the Nephilim and the human population. God took notice of this situation. The spread of violence and corruption reached a critical point. The decision was made to bring judgment on both the Watchers and their children. The coming flood would end the reign of the Nephilim and restore balance to the earth. This marked the final stage before the Great Deluge. As the Nephilim spread violence and chaos, human society began to change. People observed the giants' power and cruelty. They started to imitate these behaviors in their own lives. Tribal leaders and kings adopted the tactics of the Nephilim. They used force to conquer rivals and control territory. Weapons and armor became more common, as the Watchers had taught humans metalworking. Conflicts between human groups increased. Wars broke out over resources, land, and authority. Bloodshed became a regular part of life. Communities fortified their settlements and built defensive walls. Some people formed alliances for protection, while others sought power through aggression. The use of forbidden knowledge also spread. Humans learned sorcery, divination, and the making of poisons from the Watcher. These practices became part of daily life in many regions. The Book of Enoch describes how vanity and pride grew. People decorated themselves with jewelry and cosmetics, copying the customs introduced by the Watchers. Social order broke down further. Theft, deceit, and betrayal became common. The strong preyed on the weak. The influence of the Nephilim and the Watchers reached every level of society. Even religious practices changed. Some people began to worship the giants as gods. Others offered sacrifices in hopes of gaining favor or protection. Environmental damage increased as well. Forests were cleared for building and fuel. Fields were overworked to feed growing populations and the Nephilim's demands. Water sources became polluted. Wildlife declined due to overhunting and destruction of habitats. The situation grew worse each year. Reports of violence and lawlessness spread across the land. The moral decline affected every family and community. According to the Book of Enoch and Genesis, God saw that human wickedness had reached its peak. This widespread corruption became the final reason for the coming flood. The stage was set for the destruction of the old world and the beginning of a new chapter in human history. Corruption did not stay in one region. It spread across the entire earth. The Book of Enoch and Genesis both describe how every community became affected. Violence, theft, and deception became common in villages and cities. People no longer trusted their neighbors. The influence of the Watchers and Nephilim reached distant lands. Forbidden knowledge, such as sorcery and astrology, was practiced openly. Weapons made from new metals appeared in every settlement. Leaders who once ruled with fairness now demanded tribute and enforced their will through force. Human sacrifice and idol worship increased. Ancient texts mention that altars were built for false gods. The giants were sometimes worshipped as deities. The social order collapsed further. Families broke apart. Children learned violence from adults and repeated it. Trade routes became dangerous. Bandits and warlords controlled key passages. Goods and resources became scarce as raids and wars destroyed crops and livestock. Famine followed in many regions. People abandoned their homes and wandered in search of safety and food. The population of some areas declined sharply. The environment also suffered. Forests were cut down for fuel and construction. Rivers and lakes became polluted by waste and blood from sacrifices. Fields were left barren after years of overuse. Wild animals disappeared from areas where they once thrived. The land could no longer support the growing population. Reports of strange phenomena increased. According to the Book of Enoch, the sun and moon no longer followed their expected patterns. Seasons became unpredictable. Floods, droughts, and storms struck without warning. People saw these events as signs of divine anger. The corruption and chaos reached a point where recovery was impossible. The world's leaders and people did not change their ways. The warnings from Enoch and others went unheeded. The earth was now ready for the judgment that would come with the great flood. As the world's corruption reached its peak, Enoch was summoned by the archangel Uriel. Uriel is described in ancient texts as one of the chief angels, responsible for wisdom and guidance. He appeared to Enoch with a clear purpose. Uriel told Enoch that he would be shown the secrets of heaven and earth, and that he must record what he witnessed. Enoch agreed, and Uriel began to escort him on a journey. The Book of Enoch describes Uriel leading Enoch through various realms. They traveled to the edge of the earth, where Enoch saw the places of punishment for the Watchers and the giants. Uriel explained the consequences of their rebellion and the judgment that awaited them. Uriel then brought Enoch to the heavenly realms. Enoch reported seeing a city, not clouds. The city had many rooms and walls covered with precious stone. Inside, Enoch saw beings described as godlike, shining with light. Uriel explained the roles of these beings and the order of heaven. Enoch was shown the movements of the sun, moon, and star. Uriel explained the laws that governed the cosmos. Enoch learned about the lunar cycles and the solar year. He was shown the storehouses of wind, rain, and snow. Uriel described how these forces affected the earth. During the journey, Enoch witnessed technology-like phenomena. He described doors opening by themselves and lights that did not come from fire. Uriel explained that these were part of the workings of heaven, beyond human understanding. Uriel told Enoch to write down everything he saw and heard. These records would serve as warnings and lessons for future generations. Enoch obeyed and wrote detailed accounts of his journey. After completing his mission, Enoch was taken physically into heaven. He did not experience death in the usual way. His departure marked the end of his role on earth and the beginning of the final judgment. The Book of Enoch describes heaven in detail. Enoch reported that heaven was not a place of clouds or mist. Instead, he described it as a city. The city had walls made of precious stones. Each wall was covered in gems of different colors and types. The floors were made of crystal. The streets shone with a brightness that did not come from the sun. Enoch saw many rooms within the city. Each room had a specific purpose. Some rooms were for worship. Others were for judgment. There were also rooms for storing the records of human actions. Enoch noted that the rooms were arranged in an orderly fashion. The city was not chaotic or random. It was designed with precision. Inside the city, Enoch saw beings he called godlike. These beings were not human. They were described as shining with light and wearing robes. They moved with purpose and discipline. Some stood guard at the gates. Others assisted with the activities inside the city. Enoch identified some of them as angels, including Uriel. Enoch was shown the throne room. The throne was made of fire and crystal. Above the throne was a bright light. Enoch described this light as impossible for humans to look at directly. Around the throne, other beings stood in attendance. They sang and spoke in languages unknown to Enoch. The city had gates that opened and closed automatically. Enoch described the process as smooth and silent. He observed that the city was self-sustaining. Food and water were provided without labor. The air was always clean and clear. Enoch was allowed to walk through the city under the guidance of Uriel. He wrote down everything he saw. His descriptions of heaven as a city influenced later religious texts. The image of a gem-covered city became part of many traditions. This vision marked a key difference from other ancient views of the afterlife. During his journey, Enoch was shown the workings of the cosmos. Uriel guided him to places where he could observe the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Enoch recorded that the sun followed a fixed path across the sky. He learned that the sun's rising and setting were controlled by gates at the ends of the earth. Uriel explained that there were 6 gates in the east and 6 in the west. The sun entered and exited through these gates according to the season. Enoch observed the moon as well. He noted that the moon's light changed over time. Uriel showed him the lunar cycle, including the waxing and waning phases. Enoch learned that the moon also traveled through gates, though its path was different from the sun. The Book of Enoch contains detailed descriptions of the lunar calendar, including the number of days in a year and the way months were measured. Enoch was shown the stars and their patterns. Uriel pointed out the constellations and explained their significance. Enoch learned that the stars moved in regular courses. Each star had a set place and time to appear. Uriel described the existence of wandering stars, which modern readers identify as planets. These celestial bodies did not follow the same paths as the fixed star. Enoch also witnessed the storehouses of natural forces. Uriel showed him where the winds were kept. He saw the sources of rain, snow, and hail. Enoch recorded that these forces were released according to a set order. Uriel explained that nothing happened by chance. Everything followed a schedule established by the Creator. Enoch wrote down these observations in detail. His account included information about the length of days and nights, the timing of the seasons, and the relationship between the sun, moon, and earth. These descriptions provided one of the earliest written records of astronomical and meteorological knowledge in ancient literature. James Bruce, Ethiopian Expedition. In 1768, James Bruce, a Scottish explorer, set out on a journey to Africa. His main goal was to discover the source of the Nile River. Bruce traveled through North Africa, crossing Egypt and Sudan. He faced difficult conditions, including disease, heat, and political instability. After years of travel, Bruce reached Ethiopia in 1770. There, he was welcomed by Emperor Tekel-Hamenot II and allowed to explore the country. Bruce spent several years in Ethiopia. He visited the ancient city of Gondar and the monasteries around Lake Tana. During his time in Ethiopia, Bruce learned about the country's unique religious tradition. He discovered that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church used scriptures not found in European Bibles. One of these texts was the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch had been lost in Europe for centuries. It was considered apocryphal and was not included in the Catholic or Protestant canons. However, the Ethiopian Church preserved it as part of their official scriptures. Bruce obtained several copies of the Book of Enoch, written in Ge'ez, the ancient liturgical language of Ethiopia. Bruce returned to Europe in 1773. 1773. He brought with him 3 complete manuscripts of the Book of Enoch. Scholars in Britain and France were surprised by his discovery. The text contained 108 chapters and described Enoch's journeys, visions, and prophecies. It also included detailed accounts of the Watchers, the Nephilim, and the Flood. Bruce's expedition provided the first complete version of the Book of Enoch to the Western world. His find sparked new interest in ancient religious texts and Ethiopian history. Over time, translations of the Book of Enoch became available in English and other languages. The discovery by James Bruce remains a major milestone in the study of early biblical literature and the history of Ethiopia. The Book of Enoch is divided into 108 chapters. Each chapter contains specific visions, teachings, and prophecies attributed to Enoch. The text is organized into several main sections. The first section, known as the Book of the Watchers, covers chapters 1 to 36. It describes the arrival of the Watchers, their forbidden unions with human women, and the birth of the Nephilim. Enoch's warnings to the Watchers and the consequences of their actions are detailed here. Chapters 37 to 71 form the Book of Parables. In this section, Enoch receives visions about the coming judgment. He learns about the fate of sinners, the righteous, and the fallen angels. The parables introduce the concept of a chosen one, sometimes called the Son of Man, who will bring justice. The astronomical book, or Book of the Luminaries, is found in chapters 72 to 82. Enoch is shown the workings of the sun, moon, stars, and the calendar. Detailed descriptions of the lunar and solar cycles are given. Enoch records the laws governing the movement of celestial body. Chapters 83 to 90 are known as the dream visions. Enoch recounts two major dreams. The first vision predicts the coming flood. The second vision presents a symbolic history of Israel, using animals to represent different groups and events. The final section, chapters 91 to 108, is called the Epistle of Enoch. This part contains Enoch's moral teachings and prophecies. He addresses his descendants, urging them to live righteously. The section ends with promises of reward for the just and punishment for the wicked. The Book of Enoch provides a unique perspective on ancient beliefs about angels, judgment, and the cosmos. Its chapters influenced later Jewish and Christian writings, but the text was not included in most religious canons. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church remains the only major denomination to recognize it as scripture. After the Book of Enoch was brought to Europe by James Bruce in 1773, most Christian and Jewish authorities dismissed it. The book was labeled as pseudepigrapha, meaning it was considered falsely attributed to Enoch and not divinely inspired. Catholic, Protestant, and most Jewish traditions left it out of their official scriptures. Scholars in the West studied the text, but religious leaders did not accept it as canonical. Despite this, the Book of Enoch continued to circulate among academics. It became a subject of interest for those studying the origins of biblical literature and the development of early religious ideas. Researchers noted parallels between Enoch and other ancient texts, including the Dead Sea Scrolls. In 1947, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran changed the study of Enoch. Among the scrolls, archaeologists found 11 copies of the Book of Enoch, written in Aramaic. These manuscripts dated from the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CEE. The presence of Enoch among the scrolls showed that the book was widely read and respected by some Jewish groups during the Second Temple period. The Dead Sea Scrolls confirmed that the Book of Enoch influenced the writers of the period. Themes from Enoch appear in other ancient works, such as the Book of Jubilees and the Book of Giants. Some scholars believe that Enoch's ideas shaped early Christian beliefs about angels, judgment, and the afterlife. Modern translations of the Book of Enoch became available in the 20th century. These translations allowed a wider audience to read and study the text. Interest in Enoch grew among historians, theologians, and those interested in ancient mysteries. Today, the Book of Enoch is recognized as an important source for understanding the religious world of the ancient Near East, even though it remains outside most religious canons. As violence and corruption spread across the earth, ancient texts report that God observed the situation closely. The book of Genesis states that God saw human wickedness was great, and that every intention of human thought was evil. The Book of Enoch adds that the Watchers and their offspring, the Nephilim, had filled the world with bloodshed, injustice, and forbidden knowledge. God made a decision to act. The plan was to cleanse the earth of its corruption. According to Genesis 6:7, God declared the intention to wipe out humans, animals, creeping things, and birds from the face of the earth. The Book of Enoch emphasizes that the flood was not only a punishment for humanity, but also a judgment against the Watchers and their giant children. God called the archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel were given specific tasks. Michael was instructed to bind the leader of the Watchers, Semyaza, and his followers until the day of judgment. Gabriel was ordered to destroy the Nephilim by turning them against each other in battle. Raphael was sent to heal the earth and remove the spirits of the giants. Uriel was tasked with warning Noah about the coming disaster. God chose Noah because he was righteous and blameless among his generation. Noah received instructions to build an ark of specific dimensions. Genesis records the measurements as 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. The ark would shelter Noah, his family, and pairs of every animal kind. The decision to send the flood was final. The Watcher's petition for mercy was rejected. The Nephilim would perish. Only Noah and those with him would survive. The preparations for the flood began as Noah started building the ark. The world's fate was set. The process of cleansing the earth was underway, as described in both Genesis and the Book of Enoch. Noah's story begins before the flood, during a period of crisis. The Book of Enoch and other ancient texts describe Noah's birth as unusual. His father was Lamech, a descendant of Adam through Seth. According to the narrative, Lamech noticed something strange about his newborn son. Noah's skin was described as bright or glowing, and his eyes seemed to shine like the sun. He spoke and moved in ways that did not match normal infants. Lamech became concerned about Noah's appearance. He suspected that his wife had conceived the child with one of the Watchers. Troubled, Lamech went to his father Methuselah for advice. Methuselah, in turn, traveled to consult Enoch, who was still alive at that time, and known for his wisdom and connection to the divine. Enoch reassured Methuselah that Noah was indeed Lamech's son. He explained that Noah's unusual features were a sign that he was chosen for a special purpose. Enoch said that God had selected Noah to survive the coming destruction and to lead the renewal of human life after the flood. The Book of Enoch suggests that Noah may have been a human hybrid, marked by divine intervention, but not the offspring of a watcher. Other ancient sources described Noah as possessing knowledge and abilities beyond ordinary humans. Some traditions claim he had visions or dreams about the flood before God spoke to him directly. In the book of Genesis, Noah is described as righteous and blameless among his generation, which set him apart from others living at that time. Noah's birth and mysterious origins became central to his role in the flood narrative. His selection by God was linked to his unique qualities and his family lineage. The details of his birth were preserved in multiple sources, including the Book of Enoch, the Genesis account, and the traditions of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. God gave Noah specific instructions for building the ark. According to Genesis, the ark was to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Using the Egyptian royal cubit, this would make the ark about 538 feet long and 89 feet wide. The vessel was to have 3 decks, a roof, and a single door on its side. Noah was told to use gopher wood and to seal the ark inside and out with pitch to make it waterproof. The purpose of the ark was clear. God intended it as a means of survival for Noah, his family, and representatives of every kind of animal. Noah was instructed to bring 2 of every unclean animal and 7 pairs of every clean animal and bird. This would ensure the continuation of life after the flood. Food and provisions for both people and animals were to be stored on board. Noah began construction immediately after receiving the instructions. Ancient texts say he worked on the ark for many years, possibly as long as 120 years, though the exact duration is debated. His sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, assisted him. The project was large and required significant labor and resources. According to some sources, Noah warned his neighbors about the coming disaster, but his warnings were ignored or mocked. The ark's design focused on stability and capacity rather than speed or navigation. Its dimensions matched those of large cargo vessels used in later ancient times. Modern researchers have noted that the proportions would make the ark difficult to capsize, even in rough water. The 3 decks provided separate areas for different types of animals and storage. The construction of the ark marked a turning point. It was the first step in God's plan to preserve a remnant of life. When the ark was finished, Noah prepared to load the animals and gather his family. The stage was set for the next phase of the flood narrative. Noah completed the ark and gathered his family as instructed. His wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives joined him. Noah also began to collect animals. Pairs of every kind, both male and female, entered the ark. 7 pairs of clean animals and birds were brought on board, following God's instructions. Food supplies were loaded to sustain both people and animals. Once everyone was inside, Noah closed the ark's door. According to Genesis, this was the 17th day of the 2nd month. The rain began to fall. Heavy rainfall lasted for 40 days and 40 nights. Springs of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of heaven opened. Water rose rapidly, covering fields, forests, and settlements. The flood was not limited to one region. Geological evidence from the Black Sea and Mediterranean shows signs of massive flooding events. Around 8,400 years ago, the collapse of the Laurentide ice sheet caused a sudden rise in sea levels. The Mediterranean Sea surged through the Bosporus, flooding 40,000 square miles of land around the Black Sea. The inflow rate was about 200 times that of Niagara Falls and lasted for nearly a year. Floodwaters spread across continents, submerging low-lying areas and destroying communities. Underwater surveys in the Black Sea have found traces of ancient human settlements and freshwater fish remains beneath layers of marine sediment. These findings suggest a catastrophic event that transformed the landscape and displaced populations. The ark floated on the surface of the water. It was carried by currents, remaining above the devastation below. Every living thing outside the ark perished: humans, livestock, wild animals, and birds. Only those inside the ark survived. The floodwaters continued to rise until even the highest mountains were submerged. The narrative describes a world completely transformed by water, with no land visible for months. The survival of Noah, his family, and the animals marked the beginning of a new era. The Black Sea catastrophe is supported by geological and archaeological evidence. Around 8,400 years ago, the end of the last ice age caused the Laurentide ice sheet in North America to collapse. This event triggered a rapid global sea level rise. The Mediterranean Sea, already higher than the Black Sea, broke through the Bosporus sill. Water poured into the Black Sea basin at a rate estimated to be 200 times greater than Niagara Falls. This inflow continued for nearly 300 days. The sudden flooding expanded the Black Sea shoreline north and west, submerging about 40,000 square miles of land. The event transformed the region's geography and forced human populations to relocate. Underwater surveys have found the remains of ancient structures, tools, and freshwater fish beneath the current sea level. These discoveries indicate that people lived along the original shoreline before the flood. Sediment cores taken from the Black Sea floor show a distinct layer of marine mud above older freshwater deposits. This transition marks the moment when salt water from the Mediterranean overwhelmed the freshwater lake. The abrupt change in sediment composition supports the theory of a sudden, catastrophic flood rather than a gradual rise. Archaeologists have identified evidence of human settlements, now submerged beneath the Black Sea. These sites include stone foundations, hearths, and pottery fragments. The remains of freshwater fish found in these layers confirm that the area was once a thriving freshwater environment, home to fishing communities. The Black Sea catastrophe may have inspired ancient flood legends, including the stories of Noah's Ark and the Epic of Gilgamesh. The scale and suddenness of the event would have left a lasting impression on survivors and their descendants. Today, about 250 cultures around the world have flood myths with similar themes and details. The Black Sea flood stands as one of the most significant natural disasters in early human history. Archaeologists have found direct evidence of ancient human settlements beneath the Black Sea. In the late 1990s, marine researchers led by Robert Ballard used submersibles and remotely operated vehicles to survey the seafloor. They discovered the remains of wooden structures, stone tools, and pottery at depths that were once above water. The wooden beams were radiocarbon dated to around 7,500 years ago, matching the estimated time of the Black Sea flood. Further underwater surveys identified hearths and storage pits. These features indicated permanent habitation. The presence of freshwater mollusk shells and fish bones confirmed that these communities lived beside a freshwater lake before the saltwater inundation. Archaeologists also recovered fragments of woven textiles and simple fishing gear, including hooks and net weights. These artifacts showed that the people living there relied on fishing and small-scale agriculture. Sediment analysis provided more evidence. Cores taken from the Black Sea floor revealed a sharp transition from freshwater to marine condition. Layers of freshwater mud were suddenly covered by marine silt, indicating a rapid change rather than a gradual process. This finding supported the theory of a catastrophic flood event. Similar discoveries have been made in other parts of the world. Off the coast of India, researchers found submerged city ruins near the Gulf of Cambodge. In the Mediterranean, underwater surveys near the ancient city of Atlat-Yam revealed houses, wells, and human skeletons beneath the waves. These sites date to the same general period as the Black Sea flood. The evidence from underwater archaeology supports the idea that large-scale flooding events displaced ancient population. The sudden loss of land would have forced survivors to migrate and adapt. The memory of these events likely contributed to the widespread flood myths found in many cultures. The physical remains beneath the sea continue to provide new insights into the lives of people affected by ancient catastrophes. After months adrift, the floodwaters began to recede. According to the Book of Genesis, the ark came to rest in the 7th month, on the 17th day, upon the mountains of Ararat. This region is in present-day eastern Turkey. The ark remained there as the waters continued to decrease. Noah waited inside with his family and the animals. 40 days after the ark stopped, Noah opened a window. He released a raven which flew back and forth until the waters dried up. Then Noah sent out a dove to see if the water had receded from the ground. The dove returned, finding no place to land. Noah waited 7 more days and sent the dove again. This time, the dove returned with a freshly plucked olive leaf. Noah understood that dry land was appearing. After another week, he sent the dove a 3rd time. The dove did not return, indicating that the earth was now habitable. Noah removed the covering from the ark and saw that the ground was dry. God instructed Noah and his family to leave the ark, along with all the animals. They disembarked and began life anew on the mountain. Noah built an altar and offered sacrifices in gratitude. The Durapinah site, located near Mount Ararat, matches the biblical description of the ark's size. The site measures 538 feet long, corresponding to 300 Egyptian royal cubits. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have identified a boat-shaped structure with 3 levels, consistent with ancient descriptions. Researchers have found petrified wood, metal fittings, and animal remains at the location. 30 large drogue stones, believed to be ancient ship anchors, have also been discovered nearby. The Turkish government officially recognizes the Durapinah site as the resting place of Noah's Ark. The story of the Ark's landing has parallels in many cultures, reinforcing its importance in ancient flood traditions. The mountain became a symbol of survival and new beginnings. When the ground was dry, Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives left the ark. The animals departed as well, each kind returning to habitats that would now need to be rebuilt. According to Genesis, Noah's first act was to build an altar. He offered burnt sacrifices from the clean animals and birds he had brought on the ark. This act marked the beginning of worship in the new era. God responded to Noah's offering with a promise. The narrative describes God establishing a covenant, stating that never again would all life be destroyed by a flood. As a sign of this agreement, God set a rainbow in the clouds. This became a lasting symbol in the biblical tradition. Noah and his family became the founders of post-flood civilization. The 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the ancestors of nations described in later genealogies. Ancient texts and traditions trace the origins of many peoples to these 3 lineages. The Book of Genesis lists the descendants of each son, connecting them to regions across the ancient Near East, Africa, and parts of Europe and Asia. After leaving the ark, Noah began to cultivate the land. He planted vineyards and grew crops. The process of agriculture resumed, and animal husbandry restarted with the pairs preserved on the ark. The family established new settlements near the mountain, and their descendants gradually spread out. Archaeological evidence shows that after the Younger Dryas and major flooding events, new settlements appeared in the highlands of the Near East. Early post-flood communities practiced farming, animal domestication, and pottery making. These activities matched the descriptions in ancient texts of a society rebuilding after catastrophe. Noah lived for 350 years after the flood, according to Genesis. His story became a foundation for later civilization. The narrative of Noah's emergence and the rebuilding of life influenced traditions in many cultures, reinforcing the ark's significance as a symbol of survival and renewal. Stories of a great flood appear in more than 250 cultures worldwide. These myths share several core elements: a catastrophic flood, the survival of a chosen family or group, and the preservation of animals and plants. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, written in ancient Mesopotamia, the character Utnapishtim builds a large boat to save his family and animals from a divine flood. The details of Utnapishtim's ark, including its size and the duration of the flood, closely resemble the account of Noah. In India, Hindu texts describe Manu, who is warned by a fish about a coming flood. Manu builds a boat and survives, later repopulating the world. Chinese legends tell of a hero named Yu who controls floodwaters to save his people. In Greek mythology, Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha build a chest to escape a flood sent by Zeus. After the waters recede, they repopulate the earth by casting stones that become people. Native American tribes also preserve flood stories. The Cree, Hopi, and Inca recount tales of a massive deluge, the survival of a few, and the restoration of life. In Africa, the Yoruba and Maasai tell of floods that wiped out wickedness, leaving only a righteous remnant. Pacific Island cultures, including those in Hawaii and Fiji, describe ancestors who survived floods by seeking refuge on mountains or in canoes. Archaeologists and anthropologists have documented these myths through oral traditions, ancient manuscripts, and temple carvings. Many include specific details, such as the sending of birds to find dry land, the resting of the vessel on a mountain, or the release of animals after the waters recede. Geological evidence, such as the Black Sea flood and sudden sea level rises at the end of the Younger Dryas, supports the possibility of real events behind these stories. These shared memories suggest that ancient people experienced or remembered major flooding events. The consistency of details across continents points to a common origin or widespread cultural contact in prehistory. In the 20th century, interest in the story of Noah's Ark led to scientific and government investigation. In 1949, U.S. Air Force reconnaissance planes took photographs of Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey. Analysts noticed an unusual formation on the northwest slope at about 15,500 feet. This feature, later called the Ararat Anomaly, appeared to be a large, elongated object partially covered by ice and snow. The anomaly drew attention from intelligence agencies during the Cold War. The CIA classified aerial photographs and satellite images of the site for national security reasons. The region was near the Soviet border, and overflights were sensitive. For decades, the images remained inaccessible to the public and researchers. In 1995, the CIA declassified some of its photographs of Mount Ararat. The released images showed a boat-shaped formation, approximately 300 feet long, consistent with the biblical measurement of the ark. The anomaly was located in a remote and hazardous area, making ground expeditions difficult. Snow and ice covered the site for most of the year, limiting the window for investigation. Several expeditions attempted to reach the anomaly. In 1960, a Turkish-American team explored the area but could not confirm the presence of a man-made structure. Later, missions faced logistical challenges, including harsh weather, political restrictions, and the risk of avalanches. Most expeditions relied on aerial surveys, satellite imagery, and ground-penetrating radar. The Durupinar site, located about 18 miles south of the Ararat summit, also attracted attention. It features a boat-shaped formation measuring 538 feet long, matching the biblical description of the ark's length in Egyptian royal cubits. Researchers found petrified wood, metal fittings, and drog stones nearby. Turkish authorities officially recognized the Durupinar site as Noah's Ark in 1987. The CIA's involvement and the classification of images fueled speculation and debate. While some researchers believe the anomaly may be a natural rock formation or mud flow, others continue to investigate the possibility of ancient human construction on Mount Ararat. The Durupinar site was first identified in 1959 by Turkish Army Captain İlhan Durupinar. He noticed a boat-shaped formation in aerial photographs taken for a NATO mapping project. The site is located about 18 miles south of Mount Ararat's summit, near the village of Uzengili, at an elevation of about 7,000 feet above sea level. After the initial discovery, a Turkish team led by geologist Dr. Salih Bayraktutan and American researcher Ron Wyatt conducted several expeditions to the site. The formation measured approximately 538 feet in length and 150 feet in width. These dimensions closely match the biblical description of Noah's Ark, which is given as 300 cubits long and 50 cubits wide. The team used the Egyptian royal cubit, which measures about 20.6 inches, to compare the measurement. Researchers at the site found large anchor stones, known as drogue stones, in the surrounding area. These stones had holes drilled at one end and were similar to ancient sea anchors used in the Mediterranean. Around 30 drogue stones were documented, each weighing several tons. Some stones had carved crosses, suggesting later Christian use. Ground-penetrating radar surveys were conducted in the late 1980s and early 1990s. These surveys indicated the presence of a regular, man-made structure beneath the surface. The radar images suggested 3 distinct levels, similar to the 3 decks described in the Genesis account. Samples taken from the site included petrified wood and traces of metal. Some researchers claim to have found fossilized animal dung and hair. The Turkish government officially recognized the Durupinar Formation as the possible resting place of Noah's Ark in 1987. A visitor center was built nearby, and the site became a destination for tourists and researchers. Despite official recognition, debate continues among geologists and archaeologists. Some consider the formation a natural geological feature, while others argue for its artificial origin. The Durupinar site remains central to ongoing investigations into the Noah's Ark legend. Researchers compared the Durupinar site's measurements to the biblical description of Noah's Ark. The Book of Genesis states the ark was 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. The Egyptian royal cubit, used in ancient times, measures about 20.6 inches. Using this cubit, the ark would be approximately 515 feet long and 86 feet wide. The Durupinar Formation measures 538 feet in length and 150 feet at its widest point. This length closely matches the biblical figure, while the width is larger than described. The site's boat-shaped outline is visible both from the ground and in aerial photographs. The proportions of the formation have led some researchers to suggest intentional design. Ground-penetrating radar detected parallel lines and right angles beneath the surface. These features are consistent with the structure of a large vessel. The radar also indicated 3 distinct levels, matching the 3 decks mentioned in Genesis. Expeditions at the site have uncovered large stones with holes drilled at one end. These drogue stones are similar to ancient ship anchors found in the Mediterranean. The number and size of the stones suggest they could have served as stabilizers for a large vessel. Some stones have carvings of crosses, indicating later Christian veneration of the site. Petrified wood samples were collected from the formation. Some researchers claim to find traces of metal rivets and brackets embedded in the material. Laboratory analysis on these samples produced mixed results. Some tests identified organic compounds consistent with ancient wood, while others suggested the material could be natural rock. The matching of the Durupinar site's dimensions with the biblical description has fueled debate. Supporters argue that the similarities are too precise to be a coincidence. Critics maintain that natural geological processes can create similar shapes and sizes. The discussion about the site's origins continues as new methods and technologies are applied to the investigation. Ron Wyatt's expeditions. Ron Wyatt was an American nurse, anesthetist, and amateur archaeologist. He became involved with the Durupinar site in the late 1970s. Wyatt led or participated in more than 20 expeditions to eastern Turkey between 1977 and 1990. He claimed to have found physical evidence supporting the site as Noah's Ark. Wyatt's team conducted surface surveys and collected samples from the formation. They reported finding petrified wood, fossilized animal dung, and animal hair. Wyatt said his group discovered metal fittings and rivets embedded in the structure. He used metal detectors to locate iron concentrations in regular patterns along the formation's length. Wyatt argued these patterns matched the expected layout of ship beams and bulkheads. In 1985, Wyatt and his Turkish partners used ground-penetrating radar at the site. The radar scans suggested the presence of internal cavities and linear features beneath the surface. Wyatt interpreted these as the remains of decks and compartments. He also pointed to the discovery of large drog stones in the surrounding area. Wyatt argued these stones were ancient ship anchors used to stabilize the Ark during the flood. Wyatt's claims attracted public attention. He produced videos, gave lectures, and published reports about his finding. Many people visited the site as a result of his publicity. Some requested to be buried near the formation, believing it to be a holy location. However, professional archaeologists and geologists raised concerns about Wyatt's methods and conclusions. No peer-reviewed studies confirmed the presence of ancient wood or manufactured metal at the site. Critics noted that the drog stones were made from local rock and lacked evidence of Mesopotamian origin. Some samples identified as petrified wood were found to be naturally occurring mudstone or volcanic rock. In 1992, Wyatt failed a lie detector test about his discoveries. He was accused of exaggeration and misleading supporters. Despite controversy, Wyatt's expeditions contributed to ongoing interest and debate about the Durupinar site. Ron Wyatt's claims faced increasing scrutiny from scientists, historians, and journalists. Several of Wyatt's key pieces of evidence were tested by independent laboratories and experts. Samples he identified as petrified wood were sent for analysis. The results showed that most of these samples were naturally occurring rock, not fossilized wood. Some specimens were found to be volcanic tuff or mudstone common to the region. Wyatt also presented metal fragments, which he said were ancient fittings from the Ark. Metallurgical testing revealed that the metal was consistent with local minerals and did not show signs of ancient manufacture. No evidence of smelting or shaping was detected in the sample. Experts concluded that these metal traces were likely the result of natural geological processes. In addition to physical evidence, Wyatt underwent a lie detector test regarding his discoveries at the Durupinar site. The test was administered in the early 1990s. Wyatt failed several key questions about the authenticity of his finding. This result raised further doubts about his claims and led to more accusations of deception. Professional archaeologists criticized Wyatt's excavation techniques and documentation. They noted that he did not follow standard scientific procedures. His findings were not published in peer-reviewed journals, and other researchers were often denied access to key samples and data. Geologists who studied the Dirupinar Formation pointed out that its boat-like shape could be explained by natural mud flows and erosion patterns. They found no clear evidence of human construction or modification. The drogue stones found near the site were also investigated. Analysis showed that the stones were quarried locally and did not match the types of anchors used in ancient Mesopotamian or Mediterranean ships. The holes in the stones appear to have been added at a much later date, possibly for religious or cultural reason. Despite these setbacks, public interest in the Dirupinar site remained high. The debate over its origins continued, fueled by media coverage, documentaries, and ongoing expeditions by other researchers. Many geologists and archaeologists examined the Dirupinar site in detail. Turkish geologists, including Dr. Salih Bayraktutan, conducted field studies and sample analysis. Their research concluded that the boat-shaped formation was a natural geological feature. They identified it as a mud flow formed by erosion and sediment movement over thousands of years. The site's elongated shape, they explained, could result from the region's frequent landslides and earthquakes. International scientists also visited the site. Teams from the United States, Britain, and Europe collected soil and rock samples. Laboratory tests confirmed the presence of local volcanic rock and mudstone, not petrified wood. No evidence of ancient shipbuilding materials was found. The supposed metal fittings and rivets were determined to be iron-bearing minerals, common in the area's geology. Archaeologists reviewed the drogue stones found near Dirupinar. They noted that similar stones are found throughout eastern Turkey and Armenia. These stones were often used as grave markers or for other cultural purposes, not as ship anchors. The carvings of crosses on some stones indicated later Christian influence, likely centuries after the flood narrative was first recorded. No artifacts, tools, or signs of ancient human settlement were discovered at the site itself. Ground-penetrating radar scans suggested some subsurface features, but these were consistent with natural fissures and layering in the sediment. No evidence of compartments, decks, or man-made structures was confirmed by independent teams. Peer-reviewed publications in geological and archaeological journals supported the natural origin of the Dirupinar Formation. Most professional researchers agreed that the site did not match expectations for a preserved ancient ship. The Turkish government's recognition of the site as Noah's Ark was based on local tradition and tourism interest, not on scientific consensus. Despite skepticism, some groups continued to search for evidence. The debate over the Dirupinar site's origins became a case study in the intersection of science, faith, and popular culture. The Dogon tribe lives in the Central Plateau region of Mali, West Africa. Anthropologists began studying the Dogon in detail in the 1930s. French researchers Marcel Griol and Germain Deterlin spent years living among the Dogon and recording their customs, beliefs, and oral history. The Dogon are known for their advanced knowledge of astronomy. They have detailed traditions about the Sirius star system, which is located about 8.6 light-years from Earth. The Dogon refer to Sirius as Sigitolo. According to their oral history, Sirius has a companion star called Pio Tolo Totolo. The Dogon describe Potolo as extremely small, dense, and invisible to the naked eye. They say it orbits Sirius every 50 years. Western astronomers confirmed the existence of Sirius B, the white dwarf companion to Sirius, in 1862. Sirius B is not visible without a telescope. It is much smaller and denser than Sirius A, with a mass close to that of the Sun, but a volume similar to Earth's. Sirius B's orbit around Sirius takes about 50 years, matching the Dogon's account. The Dogon also describe a third star in the system, Memia, which they say is larger and lighter than Potolo. Modern astronomy has not confirmed a third star in the Sirius system. The Dogon's knowledge of Sirius B, however, has attracted attention from researchers and writers. Some suggest the Dogon acquired this information from contact with Western visitors after the discovery of Sirius B. Others argue that their knowledge predates modern astronomy and must have been passed down for centuries. The Dogon's astronomical traditions remain a subject of debate. The Dogon tribe continues to celebrate the Siji festival every 60 years, marking the cycle of Sirius. Their knowledge of the Sirius system remains one of the most intriguing examples of ancient astronomical lore. In the 1980s and 1990s, researchers at the Durupanar site used ground-penetrating radar to investigate beneath the surface. This technology sends electromagnetic pulses into the ground and measures the reflected signals. The goal was to identify any man-made structures or regular patterns hidden under the soil. Radar surveys revealed linear features and rectangular shapes at several depths. Some researchers interpreted these as evidence of internal compartments or decks, similar to those described in ancient accounts of Noah's Ark. Further analysis of the radar data showed 3 distinct levels within the formation. This matched the biblical description of the Ark having 3 decks. However, geologists pointed out that natural processes, such as sedimentation and fracturing, could also produce similar patterns. The debate over the interpretation of the radar images continued among scientists and independent investigators. Excavations at the site uncovered several artifacts. The most notable were large stones with holes drilled through one end, known as drogue stones. These stones weighed several tons each. Some had carved crosses, indicating later use by Christian communities. Supporters of the Ark theory suggested these stones were ancient ship anchors, used to stabilize a large vessel in turbulent water. Critics argued that similar stones are found throughout the region and were often used as grave markers or for other cultural purposes. Other items recovered from the site included samples of petrified material, claimed by some to be fossilized wood. Laboratory tests on these samples produced mixed results. Some analyses identified organic compounds consistent with ancient wood, while others concluded the material was naturally formed rock. Small metal fragments were also found, but metallurgical studies showed they matched local mineral content and did not display evidence of ancient manufacturing. Despite decades of investigation, no universally accepted artifacts or structures have been confirmed at the Durupanar site. The use of ground-penetrating radar and artifact analysis continues to be central to ongoing research and debate about the site's origin. In 1987, the Turkish government officially recognized the Durupanar site as the possible resting place of Noah's Ark. Authorities established a national park at the location and constructed a visitor center to accommodate tourists and researchers. The site became a point of interest for both local residents and international visitors. Thousands of people travel to the area each year, drawn by the biblical connection and the site's unique shape. Local legends about the Ark predate the modern investigations. Residents of nearby villages have long referred to the formation as Nuhun Gemisi, which means Noah's ship in Turkish. Stories passed down through generations describe the mountain as a sacred place. Some elders recall tales of ancient pilgrims who visited the site to pray or seek blessings. It is reported that up to 1 million people have requested burial in the vicinity, believing the land to be holy. The region contains other features linked to the Ark tradition. The village of Uzangili, located near the site, is home to several large drog stones. These stones, with holes drilled through one end, have been interpreted by some as anchors for the Ark. Local folklore claims that Noah used these stones to stabilize the vessel during the flood. Residents point to the carvings of crosses on some stones as evidence of the area's religious significance in later centuries. Archaeological surveys in the area have uncovered traces of ancient settlements. The remains of the settlement of Nashwan were found nearby. Pottery fragments, tools, and building foundations suggest that people lived in the region for thousands of years. Some researchers believe that the stories of the Ark may have merged with memories of ancient floods and local disasters. The Turkish government continues to promote the site for tourism and cultural heritage. Official recognition has helped preserve the area and maintain public interest. The combination of scientific investigation, local legend, and religious tradition keeps the Darupinar site at the center of ongoing debate and exploration. The Book of Enoch holds a unique position among ancient religious texts. It is not included in the canonical Hebrew Bible or most Christian Bibles. Early Jewish and Christian communities were aware of the book, and it influenced some of their writings. The Book of Enoch was considered scripture by certain Jewish groups during the Second Temple period, as shown by its presence among the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered in 1947. In the early centuries of Christianity, church leaders debated the book's status. Some, like Tertullian, regarded it as authoritative. Others, such as Augustine and Jerome, rejected it as non-canonical. By the 4th century, most branches of Christianity had excluded the Book of Enoch from their official scriptures. The Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, and most Protestant traditions do not recognize it as part of the Bible. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is the major exception. This church has preserved the Book of Enoch as part of its biblical canon for centuries. The Ethiopian version contains 108 chapters, including material not found in other ancient manuscripts. The text is read and studied by Ethiopian clergy and lay people. Its teachings influence Ethiopian Christian beliefs about angels, judgment, and the afterlife. Outside Ethiopia, the Book of Enoch is classified as pseudepigrapha. This term refers to ancient works attributed to biblical figures but not accepted as authentic scripture. Scholars study the book for its historical and theological value. It provides early descriptions of angels, the Watchers, and the Nephilim. Its cosmology and visions of heaven differ from those found in canonical texts. The rediscovery of the Book of Enoch by James Bruce in the 18th century revived interest in its contents. Modern translations made the text accessible to a wider audience. Today, the Book of Enoch is a subject of research in biblical studies, ancient history, and comparative religion. Its influence can be traced in later religious literature and traditions. The Book of Enoch has influenced many religious and cultural narratives around the world. Early Jewish writings, including the Book of Jubilees and the Dead Sea Scrolls, contain references and themes found in Enoch. Concepts such as fallen angels, the Nephilim, and divine judgment appear in these texts. The story of Enoch's ascent to heaven influenced later Jewish mysticism, including Merkava and Kabbalah traditions. In Christianity, the Book of Enoch shaped ideas about angels, demons, and the afterlife. The New Testament epistle of Jude directly quotes from Enoch, mentioning Enoch's prophecy about the coming of the Lord with thousands of angels. Early church fathers such as Tertullian and Origen discussed Enoch's writings and their impact on Christian doctrine. The book's descriptions of heaven, judgment, and resurrection contributed to the development of Christian eschatology. Islamic tradition also contains elements similar to those in Enoch. The Quran mentions Idris, who is identified with Enoch in some interpretations. Idris is described as a prophet who was raised to a high station. Islamic stories about angels, the heavens, and the fate of the wicked share similarities with Enochic themes. Outside the Abrahamic religions, flood myths and stories of divine beings interacting with humans are found in many cultures. The Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Mesopotamia includes a flood narrative with parallels to Enoch's account. Hindu, Greek, and Native American traditions contain stories of great floods, giants, and heavenly messengers. These similarities suggest the widespread influence of ancient Near Eastern literature. Modern popular culture also draws on the Book of Enoch. References to the Watchers, Nephilim, and Enoch's visions appear in novels, films, and television series. Researchers and authors use Enochic themes to explore ancient mysteries and alternative histories. The book's legacy continues to shape global narratives about the origins of humanity, the supernatural, and the fate of the world. In the 20th and 21st centuries, interest in the Book of Enoch and the story of Noah's Ark has led to new explorations and debates. Archaeologists, geologists, and independent researchers have organized expeditions to sites linked to the flood narrative. The Durupina site near Mount Ararat remains one of the most frequently investigated locations. Teams have used ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, and core drilling to study the formation. Some researchers claim to have found evidence of ancient wood, metal fittings, and man-made structures. Others, including professional geologists, identify the site as a natural mudflow shaped by erosion and tectonic activity. Government agencies have also participated in the investigation. The CIA and Turkish authorities have released aerial photographs and satellite images of Mount Ararat and surrounding areas. These documents have fueled further speculation about the presence of large, unexplained objects on the mountain. Despite decades of searches, no universally accepted physical remains of Noah's Ark have been confirmed. The Book of Enoch itself continues to be a subject of academic study. Scholars compare its text to other ancient manuscripts, including the Dead Sea Scrolls and Sumerian tablets. Debates focus on the book's origins, its influence on later religious traditions, and its descriptions of angels, cosmic events, and technology-like phenomena. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintains the book's canonical status, while other religious groups view it as apocryphal or pseudepigraphal. In popular culture, documentaries, books, and online forums discuss the possible historical basis for the flood and the existence of the Ark. Amateur researchers and enthusiasts share new findings and theories. Critics warn against sensationalism and emphasize the need for scientific standards and peer review. Modern exploration and debate reflect ongoing curiosity about ancient texts and events. The search for evidence continues, with new technologies and methods applied each year. The legacy of Enoch and Noah's Ark remains active in both scientific investigation and public imagination.